Right, okay, so as promised, here's a walkthrough of a live set that I've been working on recently. It's been performed a couple of times, kind of crudely, but it's coming together nicely. This set involves myself and two other artists. I'm operating Ableton and introducing clips, applying effects, and generally controlling the whole mix. And I'm working with a vocalist, an MC, and also a turntablist who's predominantly scratching using vinyl or Serato, and that audio is coming through his mixer into live. The vocalist is coming straight into live, and obviously all the clips and effects are happening inside live, and everything is going out through the master output on my audio interface. The style is kind of glitch hop, hip hop, with a bit of some sort of dancey elements in there as well. And what I'll do is I'll try and talk you through it in a fairly logical way. And I also want to sort of talk through the various control devices that I'm using here and how I've set those up. But I think probably the best way to start is I'm just going to do a quick little jam to give you an idea. Now actually in front of me I have 4 control devices, the launch pad, the MPD32, this really cheap little Ion DJ controller, and an iPad. The way that I'm doing it at the moment involves either the hardware or just the iPad. So I'm working on the transition to the iPad at the moment. It's great because using TouchOSC, I can design my own interface completely, so I can combine all the features of these 3 other interfaces into one sort of easily usable interface. Trouble is it's not the same, and there's a lot of compromises, perhaps just adjustments that you need to make, and as of yet I'm still not 100% comfortable. And I also feel like even though I can do all of that on one control surface, that actually it's nice to be able to have more than one so that you can kind of do more stuff, because even with the multi-touch there's only so much you can do really. It's nice to have a bit more control basically in the live situation. Yeah, so without rattling on too much, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the hardware at the moment. I'll use the launch pad. Jump somewhere down into this set. You can see, you'll start to get a picture of what's going on here just by looking at it, but let's just see what this here sounds like. So I don't want to go on for too long there because I'll get carried away. The audio is actually quite heavily overloaded because this is saved post a gig. I've probably got everything whacked up really. A little bit too loud. Anyway, you can hear it's over compressing a little bit on the master there, but that's just a small tweak that needs to be made with some of the output settings. Now, yeah, to give you an idea there, I was kind of using the 3 control devices, obviously the launchpad to trigger clips and scenes, the APC over here, the MPD, sorry, over here, what I didn't actually demonstrate is actually also triggering, if I want them, some extra sounds, and I've got 2 banks here. Okay, there's basically 2 different racks that I have set up that I can trigger either or both of them, depending on what I want. Okay, so let me talk you through some of the stuff that's going on here. I don't want to go on too long, but I will cover as much of this technically as possible. Just to begin with the whole input-output process, I'm using a TC Nia Connect Live audio interface. It doesn't have a lot of audio, a lot of ins and outs, it's quite limited analog-wise. I think there's 4 in, 4 out, but it does everything I need it to do. I do have sound cards with more ins and outs, but I don't really use it very much, so I like to keep it simple. This has some great DSP effects on board as well, but again, I don't really use them that much. They're just handy tools. So what's generally happening here with this particular live set is that I've got a vocalist coming in through the microphone on channel 1. If I had my microphone plugged in. Nah, it doesn't sound like a good idea, does it? Right, so maybe I won't do that. Too many microphones in this room recording things back into each other. But he would basically be in channel 1 here. Obviously the out level, the direct out level, is down at 0 because we're bringing all the sound through live. And then 3 and 4 here as the input that the turntablist is using, and again that's coming in here, and it's turned down, so we're not getting anything coming out of the mixer, the sound card directly. It all has to come through live. And then of course this is my DAW return, so this is coming from live back to the audio interface and through out of the master track here. Inside live, what that looks like, we're looking at the audio window here. Audio, the TC Nia sound card is selected, and in the input configuration I've activated just the inputs that I'm using, the 1 and 2 mono. Well, I've left the 2 stereo active anyway, but I have disabled all of the other interfaces to save on a bit of CPU there. And same with the output config, I'm keeping 3 and 4 also active so I can use it for monitoring if need be, but typically just using the 1 2 stereo master output. Okay, fairly basic settings here. Of course I'm working at a pretty low sample rate here. CD quality, it's fine, it's walking all over most DJ outputs. 128 samples. This will run faster than that, this rig. I can run it safely at 64, and it will run even at lower sample buffer sizes than that. However, in the live environment there's so many potential things that can go wrong, and especially if you're kind of jamming and making the setup as you go along, which is pretty much what this set's all about. It's very impromptu. Might end up overloading some of the effects chains inadvertently and causing lots of clipping and stuff. So as a general rule, you want to run it as fast as the computer will allow, but what I tend to adjust that rule on stage to running it as slow as, i.e. with as much latency as the artists who I'm performing with can handle, because that kind of puts me at the upper ceiling and it gives me plenty of CPU overhead, so it means I can kind of crank the set without fear of glitching out and losing audio or time. And then, okay, just to sort of go into the MIDI here, actually this Live 9 seems to, every time I turn it on, automatically set up the MPD as a control surface. I don't use it as a control surface, I simply use it as a generic MIDI device. The launch pad, and obviously this is the live control interface that transmits the data to and from the iPad. Another issue with the iPad connection at the moment is that unless you jailbreak it, it's still wireless only. Actually, I did find out there is a workaround to that. You can connect using the wire, a cable, and transmit the MIDI OSC over that directly, but you need an iPad that has mobile data, not just the Wi-Fi version, which is the one I have. If you want to know about that, ask me in a different post. Yeah, so that's pretty much what's going on here. Of course, the other MIDI interface, the other MIDI controllers here, the DJ to go, obviously got the track and remote selected on here. Don't have the remote selected for the live control track because that confuses OSC and MIDI messages, or that's what I've found it does anyway. So that's not active, but everything else, the MPD, network session 1 here, this is actually for enabling me to transmit MIDI over core MIDI from the Mac to the Launchpad and back. That comes via the audio MIDI setup. See, I've hidden all my windows. Oh no, I haven't. If I show the MIDI window here, sorry, and go to network, I can see here my iPad shows up here. If I've created a new session, iPad will show up here and I can connect to it, and that will enable me to use the network session routing to send MIDI via the network from the iPad. Okay. Again, I'm only using one or the other. I'm experimenting with the iPad at the moment. Haven't quite used it. I'm not quite confident enough with it to use it for a gig yet. So gig-wise, I'm still using these 3 bits of hardware, as I have been using this MPD in particular for a number of years now. It's rock solid and my most reliable bit of kit by a long way. Okay, so to go to the set now and have a look at what's going on in here. The first 8 tracks here are the tracks that I'm triggering. There's clips in these tracks. Some of them are groups. Within these groups there are anything, I think, between 2 and 3 additional audio or MIDI tracks that have information in. So these have been condensed from a slightly more complicated set into groups so that it fits within the kind of ubiquitous 8-track pattern that corresponds to most of the controllers that are on the market. 8 tracks is easy to control without having to change banks. I like to stay within one bank unless it's absolutely necessary to put controls on a second bank, because during your live performance it's so easy to make mistakes if you're dealing with banks, particularly when you're picking data back up. If you've gone to bank B, you've moved a fader and then you go back to bank A, if your faders aren't motorized, it's not going to restore the point. You don't know exactly where it is just by looking at it, and that can slow you down and also introduce the possibility of fairly heinous errors. Okay, so we've got 8 banks, 8 tracks here corresponding to those, or 8 groups corresponding to the various parts of the track. Obviously you can look at the labels, they'll give you an idea of what's on these. The kick track is 2 separate audio tracks. One is, no, this is a MIDI track actually. This first one is an 808 kick, and of course I've used MIDI so that I can tune each one of these kicks to the root note of the track. Okay, and also introduce slightly different patterns if I wanted to. I think I may have done, I may not have done, some of them have. Are they all exactly the same pattern? It would seem so. Yeah, nice and simple. It just keeps a nice sort of consistent pulse through the whole set, and again it's not playing all the time. The second kick track here is the loop or part that contains, I think it's all audio. Yeah, so a lot of these have been re-edited and re-rendered from other loops. And this is whichever loop contains what I would consider to be the main kick component, although there are also other ideas of kicks in some of the other parts. This is obviously the part that I consider to be the most important or containing the kick. Let me just check this one here for you. Okay. I mean, that's a fairly strong straight up on there. You can hear there's some hats. You can hear there's some hats and some clap noises and other stuff going on in there, but again, it's the kick that's key. I don't think there's much processing, if any, on here. The 808's got a corpus on there. It's good for resonance in the low end, but use it very sparingly. The loops here have already been treated enough, so there's nothing really going on here processing wise. The drum tops here consists of 3 audio tracks. Again, these are loops that have been condensed, trashed, whatever I've felt necessary to do. And then there's some EQ on one of them. I guess that's just for effect more than anything. There may be, that looks fairly surgical. There may have been some reason for specifically doing that. It's been put together over a few months, so I can't remember exactly. And on the group, though, this is where the sort of standardization of what's going on these groups starts. Auto filter and EQ3 on pretty much every track from here on. I didn't put a filter on the kick because it's not really necessary. I have a filter on the master, so if I really want to filter the very last remnants of the kick, I can do that. But all the other tracks here, groups or tracks, will have a filter on and an EQ3, and predominantly, apart from the bottom end, obviously, all the bass components, these will have a low shelf on them. So I'm just getting rid of any unnecessary low frequencies. It's pretty crude at the moment. I've not particularly picked out any frequency. I've literally used the default 250 Hz here. It's not a bad starting point. It's a pretty good starting point actually. I'd normally try to dial it down a touch if possible, but if it doesn't feel like I need it, then I'll leave it as is. And just give you an idea, the drum tops and the beats I've kind of grouped because they're drums, grouped in the sense that the auto filter for both of these, because they both have an auto filter on, is mapped to the same MIDI controller on the MPD, and it's the third fader along. Now the reason why it's the third fader is because I decided I needed to use the first 2 faders here for reverb and delay for the master. So instead of having a filter on the kick, which I didn't feel was necessary anyway, or having a separate filter for drum tops and the third group, which is beats, which again more drum components, instead of having 2 separate ones for that, I decided I could put all of those drum sounds on one filter on the third fader, and that enables me to effectively filter all of the drum stuff going on with just one slider, and enables me to access reverb and delay. And I'll just quickly demo that. Okay, so this fader here, bringing down anything that's in the drum tops or the beats track here. Okay, and at the bottom here I have track activators, so I can still independently activate and deactivate those clips. The 1 and 2 activators do not turn the reverb on and off. They're still related to the kick and the drum top tracks, so I still have independent control over turning those sounds on and off once they're playing. Okay. Yeah, so that brings us to the beats. Now the beats is another group, but this is actually an instrument rack. These clips on here are MIDI clips, and I've used the chain selector to send those MIDI clips to either one of these 2 drum racks. Open it up at the bottom, I've got a new school drum rack, which is obviously a load of sounds, and I've got an old school drum rack, which is a load of other sounds. Might not necessarily be new or old school, but it made sense to me at the time. Yeah, so depending on which one of these clips is playing, there'll be a different MIDI pattern perhaps, and also it may be using one or other of those 2 drum racks. Let me just... So this one uses the new school rack, and that one uses the old school rack. And again, I've got the filter and the activator there. Okay, so it's good to use the launch pad, obviously, or whatever you're using for triggering clips to trigger clips, but I also find that once I'm in the mix, Sometimes perhaps this is inherited from being a DJ for a long time, but with the setup of having filters on every track here and activators below, I basically have like an 8-deck mixing solution, so I can filter things out. And the reason I'm using filters instead of volume is because it just gives me a consistent volume throughout without having to worry about where this volume needs to be restored to. I can just whack the filter straight back up. These are low pass filters. I can whack the filter straight back up and I know that I'm getting full sound and at the set volume. Obviously most of the volume work when you're doing a live set really has to come in the composition stage, so you really need to get all your volume elements balanced within the set. You don't really want to be doing a lot of volume work on stage if you can help it, although you're obviously going to have to do some. So yeah, I just find the combination of filters and activators is really one of the best ways that I can play around with the track. So once I've got a load of clips launched, and they may not necessarily be from one track here, they may be across several tracks, it then makes it difficult to use the launch pad for starting and stopping those clips. But if I have the activators and the filters up here, I can really easily perform that kind of mix and play around with the elements that I've got triggered. Okay, just carry on moving along here a little bit. Obviously the bottom track here, I'll just see if there's any processing on here for you for the beats track. Just a little compressor, because it's a couple of different drum racks with different sounds. I have put some compression on there. I really try not to use compression at all, or as little as possible anyway. And again, auto filter on there, so nothing extraordinary. Again, primarily I go for native plugins. 2 reasons: latency and CPU usage, also reliability, cost, all of these other things. I just find that if you use the native plugins as much as possible, you're going to get a much more fluid set and you're going to get less issues, and you definitely get a more responsive set with a lower possible latency. But with the bottom track here, I've got some saturation on here. It's in high quality mode as it should be. There's a bit of random extreme EQ, some surgical stuff going on here. Auto filter and EQ3, but this time with it being the bottom components, the bass components, I've just actually shelved the very top. Obviously because I felt there wasn't really any information in there. I've had a good listen to it, and so I've just made a little bit more room in the top, perhaps for some of the more sparkly parts of the percussion and sort of lead lines and stuff. Inside here I think there are 2 audio tracks. Yeah, one has bass and one has sub, although those names are fairly arbitrary. It's just giving me 2 different tracks that I can put ideas onto that may have bass components, so things that I don't want to have the EQ3, the bottom shelving on, so I've got a bit more space to play around with ideas. And again, I might have complementary bass parts for some of these tracks, so again, this is very heavily overloaded at the moment. Let me sort this out. I think it's down to, yeah, a bit too much of that going on. It may be self-compressing because I'm recording at the same time. Okay, but I've got a bit of that, and then that. I mean, okay, just that enables me to have one or the other, or both. Okay, I've been through that. The melody track is actually a single track for a change. It's got a high quality EQ on here because it's quite an important part of the production. Don't want the legacy mode on anymore. Okay, auto filter, again, real simple, and that's on this track here, and activator. So again, simple controls. The extras part here is again 3 audio clips with some but not much processing on, just a bit of interesting filtering and delaying, nothing massively complicated. And the group again has the low shelf anyway, and an auto and a filter there, which is on this one. And these are the kind of extra sounds. Obviously you can put more stuff in here, but we're looking at little glitches, drops and stuff like that. that's basically what's going on here. A lot of those clips have been re-edited, chopped, whatever worked. And then again, EQ3 filter. Vocal track is again a track on its own. This has got sausage fattener on it. It's a great little third party. It's pretty low latency too. It doesn't really hog too much CPU, and it is a really good harmonic distortion, even though it's pretty it's been used a lot. Doesn't really matter. It sounds great. Compression on there too. I guess I felt it was necessary at the time, although I'll probably reconsider that at some point. Filter EQ, same process. Got the filter there. Okay. In the actual performance, I barely use these because I've got an MC, so I guess these were kind of more prompts or triggers for to let the rest of the group know that the other artists know that I'm sort of thinking about changing the theme to another idea, and they kind of work as reference points. I mean, there's nothing really massively original about those. They were probably all taken from a sample pack somewhere. May have been affected a little bit, but like I say, they're more pointers than key elements. And the final track here that's under the general control is the builds track, and this one's really important. Obviously, it makes it easy to make nice, interesting transitions. I quite often render build-ups separately from in arrangement mode using components from the track, and then consolidate it and throw it back in, just because that's a really nice, easy way to make builds and to make them work in the live environment. Obviously, to recreate a really intricate build-up in the live environment can be quite tricky. It can be done, but it's tricky, and obviously you want it to work out 99.9% of the time rather than 60% of the time or whatever. What they tend to be, though, is a clip or an element from somewhere else in the track that's been re-looped, and then with a pitch envelope or a filter envelope on them. Some of these you might even be able to see. Yeah, there's just some envelopes going on some of these. And I tend to also have them set as one-shots rather than loops. And the reason for that is twofold. First of all, it means that it's not going to keep looping, so I don't get this rebuild up going on. But mainly, actually, it's so that when I trigger these, I get the slider counter at the bottom here, sort of track position, clip position indicator, rather than the loop counter. And that really helps me to see visually, first of all, how long I've made that build up, because I don't always remember, but also gives me a really nice countdown to the transition and enables me to sort of get fingers in position for the transition to the end of the build. Just give you an example, it'd be this kind of thing. This is quite a simple one, obviously. Just builds up, and you can see the counter at the bottom here moving along. It's giving me a nice, positional information about the build-up. Okay, so something like that. And again, a similar theme recurring throughout here. Just try some of these, might be more. Okay, so that's the builds track, and also what I would put on here, although I haven't really got around to it yet, is also drops. So I'd probably call this builds and drops, and then I'd have a complementary drop, so a big crash or some sort of atmospheric drop or thing that would follow naturally from the build up. I guess I just haven't got round to putting any decent ones together. I think there's a couple in here, but I'm not going to waste any more time on that. Okay, so moving on to these next two. Now these are my two racks. The way that the control for those is set up is very much like this. This is one of the things that I use the Bank B for, because the volume controls for these two racks, and also for the other two artists that are coming through, just so you can see all these tracks here are directly monitoring. The first ones are directly monitoring the MIDI input that's coming in, so it's this stuff, and these are directly monitoring the audio input that's coming in from the MC and the decks. Okay, hence the setting here. And you can see the routing options. This is, I mean, I could specify this to only pick up MIDI from the MPD. In fact, I probably should, because I know the DJ to go controller also outputs MIDI notes occasionally if I press the wrong button. So I can specify the exact MIDI device that I want that to receive information from. And then here obviously I have the external in selected, and that's channel 1, that's where my microphone will be plugged in, and here I'm using the 3-4 pair where the decks would be plugged in. So this is where the audio is coming in, MIDI is coming in. But the volumes for these, if I go to bank B here, I like to have the ability to modify these volumes. You can see that I've actually set a max to 0, so I can't go over 0 accidentally, but I can go full range with these. But this enables me, if I want to, during the mix. The reason why they're on bank B is because I won't have to change them very much during the set. Once I've found the right kind of volume for those parts, they would pretty much stay the same, but I might want to adjust them during the set, perhaps doing a quieter section and I need to boost the MC a bit, or however it is, I might need to jump to them, and having them on a separate bank is actually ideal because it means I can't accidentally mess up volume stages whilst I'm doing effects and mixing and stuff. They're on separate banks. And I also have the track activators there, so if I really needed to I could deactivate, and it's the way that I decide which of the two racks here that I'm playing. So I use the activator for one, for track 19, gives me these sounds, and the activator for track 20 gives me the vocals there, or whatever. Or I can have both, as I said, and the volumes are here too. But I do also have a filter set up on those two, which is assigned to actually a controller on my DJ to go. Now I use the DJ to go primarily for effects, master effects that is. I have also used one of the faders, the sliders on there, for the filtering of these two racks, because it just works. It's in the right place. It's separate from the other filters, but it means that I don't have to have one hand over here doing filtering while I'm playing the pads here. I can do the filtering over here whilst I'm playing the pads here. Okay, so those are the two racks. The first one here, the bass rack, is exactly that. It's 6 instrument racks, drum racks, as you can see here on the right. Probably, there we go. Just scroll along a bit. With various, all kinds of stuff going on here, basically. It's bit of EQing, filter again, some sausage fattener. But basically, these the rack is selected via these dummy clips here. So each of these dummy clips has a chain selector envelope on it, and that chain selector is dictating which one of these. So if I just stop all this stuff, click on 1 there, we should see 2, okay, 3, sorry, get somewhere now. There we go, you can see the marker here, the orange marker's jumped to 3, 6, it's jumped over here. So that's then setting a rack specific to this theme or this particular song. Again, it's a little bit ad-lib this, so I might even change that depending on where I am and what sounds I want. I do it manually if need be. And the same goes for the glitch rack. I think in here it's a case of there being 4 different racks in here with some different sounds on, and yeah, so it works in the same way. Just have some dummy clips with some scene selection, chain selector envelopes in there. Okay, now the final 2 tracks here, there's nothing really on these, I don't think. Oh, I have got a little bit of vocal processing on there. Use one of the Ableton, processes some EQ, and a limiter on the vocal microphone, because just an extra one. There's one on the master as well, but I think I may have even set. No, I pretty much left it as is. But microphones, obviously, you need to have some range on them. Same goes for the. Oh, that's interesting. I may have inadvertently duplicated the settings for these 2 tracks without realising. well, I didn't realise, and it sounded great. So yeah, I wouldn't have actually put any of these on here, just a limiter in case I got some sort of feedback from the decks, or you know, he did something daft with it and overloaded the input. Just again to protect the outputs and everybody's ears as much as possible. It is one of the risks of doing stuff live, is that you've really got to be on the case with what you're doing. It's quite easy to, well, it's not so easy to blow stuff up anymore. It's pretty well protected, but you can certainly damage ears quite easily. Then the last three tracks here are routing tracks. Let me explain those now. So the first track here is, I call this SC, sidechain. I guess it's just a generic name that I've stuck with. But what it essentially is, it's not a sidechain. I'm using volume envelopes to create grooves. Okay, and what I've done, if we look down here, I have a rack which has 5 different volume envelopes on it, and those volume envelopes are dictated by the chain selector here, which is groove. Okay, and each of these volume envelopes is an instance of this TAL filter 2, and if I open up the first one and the second one, you can see that basically the third one, they're just progressively longer volume envelopes, and these are set to every beat. So this loop is repeating every beat. If I play, you'll see. Yeah, so it's reducing the volume of anything that's going through this sidechain track by that amount for that length of time. Now, on top of that, I think I have, let's just check out the fourth one. Yeah, slightly longer, and the fifth one I think is a slightly gated one. Okay. Now the TL filter is great. It's really simple. It lets you do this stuff really easily, and each one of these devices has a depth control, which enables you to dial in an amount of that particular envelope, which is great because you can map all of those depth controls to one macro here. And I have both of those mapped here to this DJ controller, so I can dial in my groove and I can dial in the amount of that groove. They're all very simple grooves, but you don't want anything complicated, too complicated when you're doing things live. And I'll usually have this set to a little bit, but let me just play a little bit of a, which loop's going to sound okay, so hopefully you could hear some of that happening there. What you'll notice obviously is that the kick isn't being applied, the envelope's not being applied to the kick, but I'll talk you through the routing in a minute. That's how this is set up and controlled via these two these two knobs here. The sidechain track is going out of sidechain into effects, and the effects track here is going out of effects into out. So this is literally a chain. Audio comes into the beginning and goes through 1, 2, 3 tracks before it goes to the master. The effects track here has all my master effects on it, and there's quite a few things going on here. I've mainly stuck to native plugins, but there are a couple of third-party. I think they're both from Sugar Bytes, yeah. And the first one is this Tornado plugin, which is great. Loads of different effects that you can apply amazing parameter changes to via single knobs. You can, if I just sort of go to the back end here, you can create amazing envelope and LFO variations for these different effects. But what I pretty much solely use this for is the dictator feature. And I have this dictator slider mapped to the crossfader on the DJ to go. And what this basically is doing is it's enabling me to scroll through like 1 million parameter changes across 8 different effects with just one fader move. Now it can create some really interesting stuff, and it can create some pretty whack stuff, but for that point in the track where I just want to do something that's perhaps potentially a little bit risky and might work or might not, then this is the tool I use. Just demonstrate it quickly. yeah, I mean, as you can hear, it's pretty random there to a degree, but there is some, you can sort of work out, I have worked out how to catch specific noises a little bit and make them glitch a bit, which is part of the theme of this. So that's all I'm doing with that. Yeah, you may have noticed also I pressed this play button. Now what I have is everything that's on the master effect, on the effects track here, I have it all on a switch, so that I can literally turn off everything and have the audio go directly through, and that's when the light is on, and that just lets me know that I'm hearing the clear sound with no effects on it. Also have it that way round so that I can see when my effects are all off, the light is on rather than, anyway, it's just the way it's set up. But when the light is off, all the effects are on. When the light is on, none of them are on at all. And part of the reason for that is that when you're getting carried away and you've got 7 or 8 different effects and you've dialed them all in, and you suddenly want to make a quick transition back to no effects, that can be a bit of a problem. So having that simple mapping here, just a chain, an empty chain here and a full chain here, and enabling, also doing it this way enables you to set relative volumes, because there may, I think in this one there's just a little bit of compression to tighten stuff up, so it does affect the volume a little bit, and you can just adjust for that here in the chain settings. Okay, so that was the tornado. Yeah, there's a compressor just after that because sometimes it gets a bit renegade, the output from there. Then we've got this effects rack here, the first part of the effects rack, and this is basically a grouping of, let me go back to bank A here. So we're back on bank A. Now remember, we've got filters on tracks on faders 3 through 8, but the first two you can see here now, they're mapped to ping pong and reverb, which are on master effects. Okay, so okay, so that gives me that really nice, obviously the standard reverb and delay. Not on a return track though, just too complicated with this kind of routing to do that. And I also like to leave the return tracks for monitoring functionality, so if I needed to send specific monitor mixes to various other members of the band or to other performers, I can use my return tracks to do that. The other thing that I have sort of mapped within this first part of the rack here is a filter for the entire set. Not the entire set. For the entire set except the kick. Okay, explain how that's done again in a minute. And I also have my beat repeat, which is fantastic because I use that for looping. And I have the grid assigned to a knob here and the volume to here, again capped to 0 because I don't usually want it to stack 6 dB on top of anything, especially not live. And I have an on-off button for the beat repeat here, and I obviously can see when it's on or off. Okay, this is great for a whole ruck of different reasons, but mainly just for catching loops and making build-ups like this. Okay, that was a bit sketchy, but you get the idea. I tend to use it a bit more subtly in the set anyway. The other good thing about having this set up in this way is that I can do things like okay, I can catch audio from the drum rack, from the racks that I've got set up, or from the vocalist or the scratch artist, which again is really useful. If I turn my grid up to a bar and then You get the idea. So I can catch things really easily using that technique. Those I've mapped to this particular macro as well, just so I can keep a clear eye on what's going on there easily. Okay, I can't just have the okay. And then the final part of the rack 2 here. These are all again native plugins, and they're just assigned. They're assigned actually so that to the 8 knobs on the MPD. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And they're also mapped so that when the knobs are at 0, or actually I think it should be so that when they're at 0, 1, 2 or 3, so I've set the minimum value for this device on from 3 to 127. Sorry, the range from 3 to 127. So if it's at position 1, 2 or 3, the effect will be off, so it gives me a little bit of a margin for error at the bottom. And as soon as it gets above 3, the effect comes on and parameters start to be changed. If I just expand that, you might be able to see a bit better. So it will start to change parameters after it comes on. Parameters will start to be manipulated. I think there's a sort of volcano filter effect on this one that I've put together. The reason for leaving 3 rather than just 2 there, or 1, is that obviously if you're turning up some stuff and you want to bang it back down really quickly, you don't always necessarily land on 0 again. So it's good to have the it's good to have a little bit of, like I say, margin for error. Yeah, just to give a quick demonstration again of some of these effects. I did play them a little bit at the start. Kind of a volcano effect there. Panning. Quite a subtle chorus there. Tube. That's just an EQ. Delay. Some crushing. One of my favourites actually, using some vocoder to add some interesting noise style effect there. Okay, so that's how those are set up. And again, everything, just to reflect, everything that's on here is all mapped to this one on-off button as well. So I could have every effect playing. I can turn them all off, so then if I've got myself in a bit of a pickle, I can just turn off all the effects, get back to raw sound, work out where I've gone wrong and put everything back where it needs to be. Theoretically, there is one effect I missed out on here actually, in this part of the rack, Effectstrix. It's another Sugar Bytes. It's mapped to this one button. All it does is real-time audio reversing. The effect itself is actually an effect sequencer, much like Glitch that you may have seen, but I only use it for the real-time reversing function, or primarily that's what I use it for. It just means that when I press this button at the end of the bar, I get a couple of little reverse sections like this. Let me do that again because I've got still effects on. Yeah, so just a couple of little reversed stabs at the end of the bar there. Great, so that's the effects. And then on the output track here, I've recreated a multi-band harmonic sort of distortion using EQ3 to separate out the bands, and saturator again in high quality mode with varying amounts of drive. I would normally use a better, higher quality sort of third-party harmonic distortion for production, but way too much latency involved in that. It just sucks the life out of my set. So and stops me being able to run it. Let me just turn that down a bit. Stops me from being able to run it, you know, fast basically. So I use this sort of homemade version. And I've just chucked the glue compressor, the Live 9 glue compressor, but any compressor with a fairly slow attack and release and low ratio and just some subtle settings to just give you a gentle pulling together of all the sounds. And again, I try not to use compression very much, but this is applying to turntablist and vocalist and everything, so it really does need a little bit of something to gel it together. And that means my master track actually has nothing on it but a high quality EQ, which I use for tuning the whole set to the venue, or eliminating any problems or adjusting anything, sort of the whole sound, if you like, in the live situation. I need to tweak it. I use this EQ, and just a final limiter on there. Not that it really needs it, because most of this stuff is fairly well sorted, but just to be sure that I'm not going to send any red out to the system. Now, how this routing works is simply a case of deciding where in this chain of 3 here that you want to insert your audio signal. So for example, when I was playing the audio before, you could hear that no matter what effects I applied, the kick drum stayed the same. And the reason for that is that the kick drum out is routed to the out here. So it's skipping the sidechain, it's skipping the effects, it's going straight through the out track and into the master. That means that it doesn't matter what groove or what effects I'm applying, the kick drum remains the same. And I've worked out that that's the best way for this set to work. It means that the set doesn't get too lost. If I get lost in effects, I can do a lot more effects without losing the groove of the track. And obviously I don't want the kick drum to go through the sidechain, because that's going to apply an envelope, a volume reduction envelope, when the kick is kicking, so it's going to knock the kick down too, and we don't want that. All the rest of the tracks here go directly into the sidechain, so they're all getting groove, they're all going through the effects track, and they're all coming through the out. It's pretty much how I like to roll with all this. The bass rack and the glitch rack, again, they're going into the side chain, into the groove track, and the vocalist and MC, turntablist, sorry, are going directly to the out, so they're not going through the effects or the output at all. One of the reasons for that at the moment was because I didn't want to be mashing up the vocalist and turntablist and what they were doing at exactly the same time that I was doing effects to the rest of the track. And also because when I first put this set together, the option to be able to live switch between the outputs on the track wasn't available, but it now is, thanks to Tom Cosm again, for amazing little Max for Live plugin that enables you to switch routing live using a Max plugin. So check that out. I can't remember what it's called, but it's MIDI routing switcher or track switcher. It's on the Live Lab page, so get on there and check it out, and of course it'll be on Cosm's page as well. But that would enable me basically to put one of those on this track and have a MIDI assignment to say when it's going through the effects and when it's not, and the same goes for the other artists, and that's kind of breakthrough in terms of live performance especially. And that's how this whole routing rig is working. You can see here, sidechain, it's going out to the effects is going out to the out, and master out is going to the master. In terms of arrangement of these ideas, these are the varying numbers of scenes depending on the complexity of the track. Also, if there's any particular little transitions that I've kind of worked out that I'd like to do. It tends to be 2 or 3. These have gone up a bit to 5. I think I may have decided 5 was a good number at some point, but I've moved away from that again now. I don't think there's any necessity for any standardization, just whatever works really. One thing that I do try to do though is make sure that I can see at least 2 separate tracks within one view. So I don't want to have, ideally 3 actually, sorry, so that I can select components from across 3 adjacent tracks to create, easily. I can obviously do it by scrolling up and down, but within one view I want to be able to have a pick of several different elements really, and that that opens the door to a bit more ad-lib mixing and recreation of the ideas in a more sort of unique and interesting way each time. So yeah, that's pretty much how the scenes will be arranged. Also, I think with these slightly longer ones, they are arranged so that theoretically you could just play through the scenes and it would make sense. But of course there wouldn't be any repetition of sort of verse, chorus. You would be relying on manual repetition, so just playing verse, chorus, break, verse, chorus, break in that sort of sense. And again, as much as possible is being left to kind of live improvisation. Right, well, I think I've covered all the key components here. Is there anything that I didn't demonstrate? I don't know. If there's anything that you'd like me particularly to show, any of these mappings or routings, then just drop me a message or whatever. I've also got the iPad set up here with the Touch OSC live control for iPad, which is great. It's got plenty of it's got all the controls that you might ever want, really, in terms of live manipulation, controlling what's going on in screen, as well as inputting MIDI, drums, keys, whatever you wanted to do. Again, I'm not 100% comfortable with it yet, and although it's great and it allows you to design stuff yourself, I have built my own interface. It's not quite set up perfectly for this particular set, but the latest set I'm working on will be kind of co-designed with an iPad template, so that it's from the ground up, really. It's built to work with it, and I'm hoping that that's going to give me a bit more confidence to use the iPad in the live situation. I do use it for DJing, actually, controlling live DJing, because it's a little bit simpler and it's easier for me to have hardware on standby and just plug it in and take over if things go a bit Pete Tong or whatever. Right, so yeah, I hope that sort of helps. It's given you some ideas of how I work the live set. If you're interested in knowing more, obviously go to the page, click on like, ask me some questions and ting. Yeah, so yeah, thanks very much for paying attention and take care. Bye bye.